Hi everybody, welcome to my channel, Life, Law, Bin. Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. It's good to see all of you again. Today I have a very amazing guest with me. All my guests are wonderful and hold a special place in my heart, but I'm very pleased to have Konstantina Nouka with me. And today we are talking about her journey so far to the bar and the amazing bringing disability to the bar. Now, we know that there has not been an organization like this in the past, so I'm very excited to talk about this, to speak about the hurdles that disabled aspiring barristers have to face, and to really speak about accessibility in the profession. So, welcome, Constantina. It's a privilege to have you.
Thank you so much for this invitation. I'm really excited to discuss this with you.
Great. So let's start with your background first. So do you mind just sharing with with our viewers, sorry, a bit about your journey into law? We know you've done an LLB and an LLM, so we're really interested in knowing how you handle those things.
So I moved to the UK in 2015 and I essentially started year 11. I joined the educational system in the UK in the middle of year 11. So I had to do my GCSEs within 6 months with a bare minimum understanding of English. So that was not an easy experience because I didn't get the grades that you expect to see in an aspiring barrister. Let's say got average grades due to the difficulties of not speaking English and not having the support I required. And then I moved to college to do politics, law, and philosophy. And then I went on in the University of Reading to do my LLB. So nothing too exciting, just an LLB in law. And then I did my LLM in human rights law at UCL before commencing the bar course now at City. So a very straightforward academic, let's say, journey to the bar. Nothing as exciting as changing a degree and, you know, just straight to law, basically.
Now, I'm sure you just spoke a bit about politics. How does that help you? How did that inform your basis in law and your studying in law?
So I'm really interested in public law and criminal law and the intersection in the adjacent areas of public crimes, like inquests, the public inquiries. And I was really like politics and A-level law together. They provide me this understanding of like debating and trying to challenge ideas and how law sometimes can be impacted by decisions of the government. Some legislations might not be implemented or proposed because in the next elections they might not be so favorable for the candidates. For example, as suicide, just as an example of something that was like controversial and in terms of like elections. But at the same time, I felt that law would be able to give me a way to challenge the government in a sense and hold them accountable. So I think that is like the relationship between politics and law for me that led me to choose law instead of politics as a career.
Yeah, it definitely seems as though there was a lot of thought there, and I can definitely see the connections, and it will feed very nicely into the discipline of public law and crime. Now, you are on the very taxing bar course, and I say that with a smile because um, I still remember that course very vividly. It's very overwhelming and can be very stressful. With that being said, are you enjoying the course?
I finally feel like being a law student in the movies, being taught cross examination and advocacy and criminal litigation. It's so so fun, but at the same time, it's super overwhelming. It's it's overwhelming in the one way of being an immigrant. So I I have the feeling, the imposter syndrome of sounding different than home students, and sometimes mixing Greek and like Russian and French in my mind, which are the other language I speak, with English. So trying to not speak any other language out of the blue, and at the same time trying to ensure that my disability won't interfere with my studies, because I need to balance my energy essentially. So it's such an exciting course, but definitely the most overwhelming I've done so far.
Now, you've touched on a few valid points there. One thing I find with students that come from abroad, we're not home students, we do always tend to feel, will our advocacy be appreciated as much as the home students? Because we don't necessarily have the BBC polished accent or the standard Londoner accent. Or even some of the other accents across England and Wales. So you always wonder to yourself, will they accept my advocacy? Will they still see me as quite persuasive? And it definitely does kind of feed that whole imposter syndrome. But there is one thing I wanted to really commend you on, and I think it's an asset. I understand that you have to still struggle with it a bit, but it's fantastic that you know multiple languages, especially living in a globalized environment. I think it will be super, super helpful. So I think that that's wonderful.
I just think that even if everyone, that's on the barcodes, kind of deserves to be there, but sometimes we push ourselves more than we have to. So this is when the imposter syndrome like kicks in. And I mean, we will be practicing in the UK, hopefully, which is an international country mostly. So an accent should not be seen as something that as a negative, but this is something for us to embrace. But at the very start of your journey to the verge of all these fears and questions that you try to balance out.
That's absolutely correct. I think we have enough on our plate to worry about and wonder about as students who, or persons or applicants who weren't born in the UK and don't have that traditional accent. And it just seems like there's an additional barrier that we all have to kind of overcome so that you can be considered. Now, what difficulties have you encountered on the bar course?
I've been very lucky for City Law School to have we had a very frank conversation very early on about what adjustments I need. So I haven't I have been supported as much as possible in terms of accessibility and ensuring that all of my classes will be at the same place and getting extra time in exams. So in that respect, I've been it's been a very positive experience. However, at the same time, it's a bit challenging to try and because my exams they will like be online, obviously, like most of the students, in the sense of the papers, but I won't be able to use a whitebook, the physical copy. So it's the process of trying to ensure that the bars and off boards will be okay with me using an alternative format of the whitebook, and then finding that alternative format and being able to highlight it, and also try to balance the workload in a way with flare ups and everything. So I think it's about finding what works for me at this point. It's very early on still. So it's a learning process, but it's definitely been a positive experience so far. with the exception of being very overwhelming.
And I definitely think that that's something that all of us tend to face. As everyone that goes on that course finds it very, very overwhelming. And I'm sure that essentially you find a way, or hopefully they'll
I
allow
just
you to use that white book, the soft copy. Yes, you were saying something.
I just was gonna say that what I think is very important, especially if you have a disability, is you have to have a conversation with your backwards provider as early as possible. You need to be very clear about what adjustments you need. Nothing is too much or too silly to ask. If you need to have extra time, you need to ask for extra time. If you need to have a scribe, ask for a scribe, or if you don't know, need your classes to be within a 2 or 3 day window, you have to ask for that. Or even things like you need snacks during your exams, you have to ask for them. At the very early stage of my legal journey, I was sometimes worried whether an adjustment would be proportionate, let's say, or not in the eyes of the non-disabled person. But then as I, progressed in my journey, I understood that in order to achieve your full potential, you need to be honest with yourself first with what you need and then tell the others. So I think that's really important, especially when you start such a hard and competitive course.
Oh, that's super important. And I'm glad that you've highlighted the main element of communication. And the thing about it is, I do presume it could be easy to slip into this thing where you feel embarrassed to ask or to request. But I think quite fairly it's a situation about equity. You need to have some kind of equitable solution and you can't be at a disadvantage. So I'm very happy to hear that you've encouraged those persons who do have a disability to speak up, to ask a question, because if you don't, sadly they just wouldn't know how to support you. Now, given that we're talking about hurdles, outline the types of hurdles that you encountered when pursuing all of your studies, if you recall them.
So there are two types of hurdles. The first type of hurdle relates to physical challenges, that is in the form of a lack of wheelchair access, broken lifts, or I don't know, for example, a building being too far away in a campus from another. So it was very challenging. You have to move between buildings in a beautiful winter UK weather with the rain. And as this very wet and humid weather experience, it's not great for accessibility. And the second one is barriers in altitudes. But let's start with the first. In this specific practice that we want to pursue, the bar, a lot of the chambers are not wheelchair accessible, or if they are, they might be accessible in some parts. So you might have access to get into the ground floor and in the lobby area, but where clients might sit and have the conference rooms, but you won't necessarily have access to the offices, for example, or if you might and have gone to an office, it's supposed to be accessible, but then the wheelchair is too big or too small for the ramp, or the ramp might not be very stable, let's say, because it has not been fitted for specifically for that, steps to try to overcome them. And the same also applies to courts. When I studied like marshalling and or many pupils and I had to be at court, I found it very difficult to find a place to position my wheelchair because I had to literally sit between the public gallery and the benches of the council, which is not the most dignified way for an aspiring barrister, to be sat at. And many pupillage, marshalling, and visiting chambers is something that has to be, is part of our CV, essentially, when we apply for pupillage. And it shows our commitment to the profession, which I'm not sure is the best way to demonstrate our commitment to the profession. But at the moment, that's kind of the accepted way, let's say. And then when we consider the barriers to attitude, I received comments many times that I should do a PhD of the bar course because a career as an academic is more accessible as a career of a barrister. Or if I want to be a barrister, let's do something that does not involve crime because crime will be way too challenging for a wheelchair user. So you get comments that are not meant in a malice way. You get comments of people trying to help you in brackets, but essentially what they do is kind of destroy your morale. They have the effect of, destroying your morale you don't get, if you don't have this attitude of, listening to them and then just reject them and move forward. For some people might be negatively affected too much by these comments. And I think that's the problem of lack of understanding and awareness on being different than the norm.
Oh, definitely. I don't think that many people. You're right. They sometimes they mean to help, but insensitive comments do a lot of damage, and I don't think a lot of people realize how damaging it can be, and also how frustrating it must be to be already trying to keep up with the rigors of a mini pupillage or the rigors of trying to get to a classroom to have a particular session, and you are just prohibited from accessing the building. I cannot imagine how frustrating that is, honestly.
I think when I was reading the book of Leslie Thomas Casey, he mentioned at some point that he was like feeling like a trespasser at some point in his career very early on. And that's an experience that I was getting when I was visiting one of the inns of God. And I was the only, visibly disabled person, a woman, and then a woman with an accent. So this combination of diverse characteristics make you sometimes feel even more stressed than the normal amount of stress that comes with pursuing career at the bar.
Of course, of course. Now, what do you think? I think we kind of touched on it inadvertently, but what do you think would be some helpful solutions that could be implemented to assist you and others in overcoming these hurdles?
I don't think there's one type of solution. There has to be a mixed approach. Obviously, we need to find a way to overcome the physical barriers that can be in a form of try to implement more and more of hybrid working or try to coordinate with other offices where accessibility is present if you cannot attend that particular set of chambers or court, but also try to publish the information on the website so a prospective candidate can identify which set is accessible and which one is not. And also describe what accessibility is meant on that set because something is accessible to me might not be the accessibility required for someone else. We cannot see disability as one concept fits all. My needs might be different than the needs of someone else, depending on their condition. But also there needs to be social education and awareness about not being afraid of the different and understanding that each person brings with them their own experience experiences, and some of the experiences and the skills that a disabled or an immigrant person that they have developed through their own challenges are actually very beneficial for a career that busts empathy and being able to find solutions quickly and think out of the box. And language, we need to find a way to be more mindful of what we say and how we say things. Some phrases that are used to describe people with disabilities might not be the most appropriate ones and might actually cause some, emotional harm. But there's not enough awareness out there about our language and how we can use more equity, diverse, and inclusive language as a profession.
But now that you're talking about language, because that's a very important point, how important is the use of correct terminology when referring to a person with a disability? And how do you think people can go ahead to educate themselves on that correct terminology?
I think language is key, but it's only sometimes at the beginning people make mistakes and everyone makes mistakes, especially if you are not familiar or don't have any acquaintances with the disabled community. But once you get corrected, then it's wise to try and follow the comments, and it's important for sets of chambers, the bar council, everyone within a profession to try and promote the use of more inclusive language or ways to try and ask how to be more inclusive.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense then, because I think sometimes it's really ignorance, and when I say ignorance, I mean the fact that some people just do not know how to refer to them was refer to persons with a disability, and what would be seen as a polite way of referring to persons. And maybe it sounds as well too like you need to have a conversation, communicate, find out in a polite way, obviously, how would that person like to be referred.
And it's also how the interaction between being out in a professional environment, me and my PA, and actually third parties to try and refer to my PA about things that are concerned, are concerning me. For example, being out trying to get a train, and then a train, the platform person actually saying to my PA that she will get on this train instead of actively talking to me. So this kind of ableist experience, which I don't think was meant in any harmful way, but as you can imagine, first day of bar school, having to encounter this was quite not the best experience to start your day, let's say.
Completely understood. No, I know that you've received two scholarships from Inner Temple, so congratulations on those scholarships. And that's the Honourable Society of Inner Temple Exhibition Scholarship 2022 and the Honourable Society of Inner Temple Duke of Edinburgh Entrance Award. One covers all of the bar course fees, to my understanding, and the other one covers your admission and call to the bar fees. Now, what advice, given that it is the season now for persons to be applying for scholarships, what advice would you share with any aspiring barristers who are desirous of applying for these scholarships, particularly those who have a disability?
Two words, be honest. In my application, I was very cautious at the beginning to try and make this list of things that I expect the scholarship committee to one for me, mooting, mock trials, and many privileges. But then I was in the very dangerous route of not sounding like me. And I had to really put that pressure of trying to fit the stereotypical application of an aspiring barrister to tailor to sound like the real Konstantina. So the scholarship committees, they're not expecting you to be a ready advocate. They're looking, for raw potential and a commitment to the profession. And that can be in many different ways, more than just smoothing or advocacy and debating. And they want to see that you can survive in a very challenging environment. So reflect on your previous experiences, reflect on, I don't know, any work you had as a sales assistant, and think how that experience of talking with others might actually give you great skills for the bar. And then if if you have any disabilities or you have conditions, ask for adjustments. In my interview, I asked for extra time because I felt that my lungs would not support me if I was going to speak very fast in order to say as much as possible in this very tight timetable of and schedule of the interview. And I wanted extra time to prepare for my case. So I put my original adjustments forward, and I felt so confident during the interview because I knew that I would have this fair chance of success and had my support in place. So I think that's kind of the nutshell of my advice of apply for scholarship and how to get one.
That's very comprehensive and helpful advice, and I'm sure that persons will benefit from it.